Yo, what's going on, guys? It's Houston Sports Talk back into the video day, and today the Houston Texans beat the Chicago Bears 19-13. Good win for the Houston Texans. I'm not going to say great win because I still think there are some, struggles that we've seen from our Texans early on in the first two games. But here's the thing I'm going to say to start off is that even though the Texans, in my opinion, have played bad in these last two games. Yes, they've had their good moments. We've seen some great kicking from Kaimi Fairbairn. We've seen some great catches from Nico Collins. We've seen some nice throws from C.J. Stroud as well. But there have been some struggles. I don't think you'll see any Texans fan deny that. So there have been struggles. But even though there have been struggles, the Houston Texans are still starting the season off 2-0. That's what impresses me. That's what scares me about this team. That the offense is not at their best right now. Yes, did C.J. Stroud have a good game? He threw 260. He had one touchdown pass. He threw 23 for 36. But one thing I am, mainly thinking about is the struggles on third down in this game today. 4 for 14 on third down in this game for the Texans. That has to be a little bit better. Texans went 7 for 14 on third down last week in Indianapolis. That is good. The Texans need to be in more of that area. So Texans really bad on third down in this game. You'd like to see them better at that in the weeks following. That's really the only disappointing thing I thought of C.J. Stroud in this game is you got to be better on third downs. Which a couple of those third downs were runs. So anyways, Stroud was good. Collins was great. Kaimi Fairbairn was amazing. But you can still recognize this Texans team is still not playing at their best strength. The defense was great today. It had 7 sacks. It's the big storyline that Caleb Williams got sacked 7 times. We'll get to that in just a minute. But I still think this Texans team has more potential than what they're showing right now. I think their defense is really showing their potential, even though they've had some struggles here and there. The defense, I thought tonight really showed what they're going to do this season. They did have a little bit of a bad drive to end the second quarter that ended up in a Khalil Herbert 2-yard touchdown run for the Chicago Bears. But that was really the only struggling drive for the Texans defense in this game. Outside of this, outside of that drive, this Texans defense was perfect in this game. They did an amazing job. The offense was the only struggles I really saw, and hopefully those can get improved. And I'm pretty sure they will get improved, but it's going to take some time. 19-13 is the final score. Like I mentioned, Kaimi Fairbairn is the man. A 56-yarder to start off the day. It's 3-0. What's funny enough, and I'll get into what I was gonna say after I'm done with the scoring summary. Kyrie Santos with a 53-yard field goal. It's 3-3 to tie the game. C.J. Stroud throws a 28-yard touchdown pass to Nico Collins. In the second quarter, first play of the second quarter, it's 10-3. Fairbairn with a 47-yard field goal. It's 13-3. Herbert with the 2-yard touchdown. It's 13-10. Fairbairn with the 59-yard field goal. It's 16-10. Fairbairn with a 53-yard field goal. It's 19-10. And then Carlos Santos with a 54-yard field goal. Both kickers were just drum them. Santos had two 50-yarders. Fairbairn had 3 50-yarders and a 47. Absolutely killing it in this game. You love to see it. Now, the thing I was going to get into was, funny enough, I actually have, my cousin's husband is in town for business, and he came over to my grandparents' house, and we're watching football. Not the Texans game, the afternoon games, like the Bengals and the Chiefs and the Cardinals and the Rams. And, we're talking he's a big football fan, so we're talking about football. And, he was down in fantasy. His opponent, all of his players had already played. The cousin's husband, all of his players have played except one player, kicker Kaimi Fairbairn. And he was down 18 points. And we were talking about if Farrenbarren can do it back-to-back weeks like he did last week. Because last week, he was one of the top, kickers last week in fantasy points because of the performance he had in week 1. This is back-to-back weeks for Kaimi, where he's absolutely killing it for the Houston Texans. Last week, he had, I think it was like 350-yarders for the Houston Texans. So he does that again this week. But we were talking about if he would. I was like, I don't know. What I was telling him was that I think this Texans offense is going to get going. I think there's going to be a day where the Texans get a bunch of touchdowns. Man, was I wrong? Texans only got 1 touchdown. It was all Farrenbarren, and I haven't talked to him since I went home. But I'm sure he did win with Farrenbarren knocking in a 56-yarder, a 53-yarder, a 59-yarder, a 47, and an extra point. So, Farrenbarren has done the impossible for some fantasy managers, is what I'm trying to say. And he has just done an amazing job for the Houston Texans to start out the season. Honestly, he's the team MVP through the first 2 weeks. I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I think as the season goes by, you're going to look at C.J. Stroud as the team MVP. But through the first 2 weeks, it is fair to say that Kaimi Farrenbarren has been the guy for the Houston Texans. All right, game leaders, Caleb Williams in passing yards, 23 for 37, 174 passing yards, 2 interceptions thrown. C.J. Stroud, 23 for 36, 260 passing yards, 1 passing touchdown. Look, I'm not saying it was a bad day for C.J., it was a great day for CJ, but there were some struggles on third down. And honestly, I think he even though he did a really good job in this game today, I still think he can do better. I'm not saying you got to go do better because, with the way they're playing right now, they're still winning ball games. But I know he can play better. I've seen better football from him. I'm just excited to see him fully wake up. I think this was a way better game for him. I would say this was a better game for him than it was last week against Indianapolis. He had more passing yards, but at the same time, there are less touchdown passes. But I think we'll see him wake up even more as the season goes by. All right, rushing yards. Caleb Williams led them in rushing yards. 5 carries, 44 rushing yards. Cam Akers led the Texans in rushing yards, 7 carries, 32 rushing yards. Unfortunately, Joe Mixon did get hurt in this game. But then he came back. It's an ankle injury. We'll see what happens with him. That was very concerning going into the season, in preseason and training camp. Now that has come back. So hopefully Mixon's okay. He was doing pretty solid in this game before he got hurt. We'll go over him when I go over the full stats. DJ Moore led the Bears in receiving yards with 6 receptions for 53 receiving yards. Nico Collins had 8 receptions for 135 receiving yards with 1 touchdown. It's been fantastic to start off the season. I said before the season started, Nico Collins is still the guy. Stephon Diggs is a great addition. Stroud's going to love throwing the ball to him. She's going to still love throwing the ball to Dell, but Nico Collins is still the guy for C.J. Stroud to throw the football to. For the Bears, outside of Caleb Williams, DeAndre Swift, man, has he been a little bit disappointed to start of the year? 14 carries, 18 rushing yards. This is not just the Texans defense. He had a terrible day last week against the Titans against the Titans run defense. And I watched what the Jets run game did to the Titans yesterday. I don't know about DeAndre Swift. He's not doing too good to start the season. I thought he'd be a good addition for this Bears team. He was good on the receiving end. He had 24 receiving yards, but he's been disappointing as the running back so far for the Bears. But going back to the Texans, outside of Akers, Mixon had 9 carries for 25 rushing yards. So it's not 150 rushing yards. I didn't think Mixon was going to... Honestly, I didn't really think Mixon was going to have a good day anyways. I thought the Texans were really going to go back to, main pass game. It was nice to see them have a game where CJ doesn't have to do a lot and you give the ball to the running back 30 times. That's amazing, but I thought the Texans were going to go back to what they do love. I thought the Texans were going to go back to doing what they love most, and that's passing the football. And yes, they did run the ball 21 times today, 2 carries for Durango Ballaway for 3 yards. Tank Dell had 3 carries for 16 rushing yards. Mixon had 9 for 25 5. Cam had 7 for 32, but last week I think Dameon Pierce had 3 carries and Mixon had 30. So, this was a game where the Texans were, winning. So, they were running the ball a little bit more to, run the clock out. So, I was thinking the Texans were going to pass more in this game than they did last game, and they did. Stephon Diggs had 4 receptions for 37 receiving yards. He had the most receiving yards outside of Nico Collins on the team. Mixon did have 3 receptions for 25 receiving yards, so 50 yards in the day for Mixon. Dalton Schultz had 2 receptions for 21 receiving yards. Duran Gaballaway had 2 receptions for 20 receiving yards. How about the rookie Cade Stover on one of the first drives? It was like the first or second drive. C.J. Stroud threw an 18-yard pass to Cade. I'd love to see that personally. The Ohio State quarterback to Ohio State tight end. Cade was C.J.'s tight end in C.J. Stroud's senior year at Ohio State. Cam Akers had 1 reception for 3 receiving yards. Brevin Jordan had 1 reception for 4 receiving yards. Outside of DJ Moore, Rome Odunze had 2 receptions for 33 receiving yards. During DeAndre Carter, former Houston Texan, had 3 receptions for 32 receiving yards. And Cole Kmet had 4 receptions for 27 receiving yards. Fumbles. Cam Akers did lose a fumble in this game. It was recovered by Kevin Byard, former Tennessee tight end. Now let's get into defensive stats. Tremaine Edmonds led the Bears in tackles with 11. He also had a sack, 1 tackle for loss. That was one of 3 sacks for the Bears today. Jack Sanborn had a sack. Also a sack for Gervon Dexter Sr. They had 6 tackles for loss. So not a terrible day for the Bears defense, but it was a monster day for this Houston Texans defense. We saw 3 sacks for Will Anderson Jr. and Danielle Hunter, 1.5 for each of those 2 guys. So Henry To'oTo'o had 13 tackles with 1 sack and 1 tackle for loss. Jalen Petrie had 10 tackles for 1 tackle for loss. Azeez Al-Shaair had 10 tackles, 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss. Jimmy Ward had 7 tackles. Danielle Hunter had 5 tackles, 1.5 sacks, 2 tackles for loss. Kalen Bullock had a total of 4 tackles. Kamari Lassiter had 4 tackles. Will Anderson Jr. had 4 tackles with 1.5 sacks and 2 tackles for loss. Eric Murray had 2 tackles. Florenzo Futakasi had 2 tackles. Mario Edwards Jr. had 1 tackle which was a sack. Same thing goes for Derek Barnett, who had a sack. Even DeRay Nkobalowe had a tackle. I think that was on special teams, or actually I think that was probably on the fumble. I would guess that was on the fumble. Chris Boyd had a tackle. Neville Hewitt had a tackle. And Jake Hansen had a tackle. Derek Stingley Jr. did not have any tackles in this game. He really struggled in this game, though. It was a great day for the defense. And, he did have an interception. Derek Stingley, I did forget about the interception for Derek Stingley Jr. He did have an interception. And then, how about Kamari Lassiter with an interception? The first 2 weeks of the season, interceptions for both of the 2 guys that the Texans drafted in the secondary. Kalen Bullock with an interception last week against Indianapolis, an interception for Kamari Lassiter this week against the Bears. I don't know how many people would have thought in the first 2 weeks of the season both of those guys would already have their first picks of the season. I would have, if anyone, honestly, I like Lassiter. He had a great interception in this game, but I would have guessed it would have been Kalen Bullock over Lassiter. Because I really like Bullock. I think he's a terrific safety, and I've liked what he's done in the first 2 games. But I've really liked what he's brought in. Anyways, and also I just think he has a great skill of tracking where the ball's going to be at. It's been talked about so many times on Texan social media. Texans media about how the fact that how he played center field in baseball, and that has really turned him into a terrific safety. So I would have thought he would get the interception first, and I wouldn't be surprised if you told me he had an interception in the first 2 weeks. But if you told me both of them did, that would surprise me. So this defense has been great. 7 sacks, 2 interceptions in this game. Defense was great last week. Had an interception against Anthony Richardson. The difference, The difference I will say between the last two games and defensive wise is something I said when I did my Texans preview was you cannot, get killed on the deep ball again. And so that's something that didn't happen in this game. The deep ball was not a problem for the Texans. It was last week. Anthony Richardson was slinging it against the Texans. But that was not a problem in this game. We'll see how things play out next week, though. Because next week you're facing Justin Jefferson. I really would hate to see what happened in week 1 happen going up against that guy. Because, it's so weird because I have Justin Jefferson in fantasy. I got to figure out what I'm going to do next week with him going up against the Texans. So let me know your thoughts on the Texans getting the win 19-13. Texans are 2-0. Also, forgot about this. The one other big positive. In the AFC South, the Texans are 2-0. Everybody else is 0-2. Colts, Jags, and Titans all 0-2. Thank you, New York Jets. Thank you, Cleveland Browns. Deshaun Watson, I guess. And also, thank you, Packers. Let me know your thoughts on the Texans getting the 19-13 win. That's the video. Hope you guys enjoyed, and peace out. Go Texans.